Do you know what broke feels like? Not poor. Broke is temporary. I'm talking about the kind of broke where you're standing in a grocery store, doing math in your head, trying to figure out if you can afford eggs this week, where you lie awake at night listening to your own heartbeat because you can't afford to turn on the heat. I know that feeling. I lived it for years. My name is Margaret. I'm 94 years old. And I have more money in the bank right now than I ever thought possible when I was young. Not because I got lucky. Not because I inherited anything. Not because I made some brilliant investment that paid off. But because I learned something that most people never figure out. Money isn't about math. It's about behavior. And your behavior around money is determined by one thing and one thing only. Whether you understand what money actually is. Most people think money is freedom. It's not. Most people think money is security. It's wrong. Money is a magnifier. It makes you more of what you already are. If you're anxious, money makes you more anxious. If you're generous, money makes you more generous. If you're foolish, money makes you more foolish. And I learned this the hardest way possible. I grew up during the Great Depression. My father lost everything in 1932. And I mean everything. The business, the house, his dignity. I watched him shrink. Not physically, emotionally. He went from being this strong, confident man to someone who apologized for existing. My mother, though she was different. We had nothing. I mean, we were eating dandelion greens from the yard. But she never seemed poor. She seemed focused. She'd say, "Margaret, broke is a temporary condition. Poor is a state of mind. Don't you ever confuse the two." I didn't understand what she meant then. I was 8 years old and hungry. All I knew was that I never wanted to feel this way again, so I made myself a promise, a child's promise, that I would always have money, that I would never be vulnerable like my father was. But here's the thing about promises you make when you're 8 years old and terrified. They shape your entire life. Sometimes in ways you don't realize for decades. I got my first job at 14. Worked at a bakery after school. Made 35 cents an hour. And I saved every single penny. Not most of it. Every penny. I'd walk the 2 miles to work instead of taking the streetcar. I'd bring my lunch in a paper bag. I wore the same dress to church for 3 years. By the time I was 18, I had $247 saved. In 1950, that was real money. My friends thought I was crazy. They were buying records and going to movies, and I was counting pennies like a miser. And you know what? They were right. I was crazy. Not about saving. About why I was saving. I wasn't saving for something. I was saving against something. Against the terror I felt watching my father lose everything. Against the fear that I would end up like him. Against vulnerability itself. That's not wealth building. That's trauma management. I got married in 1952. His name was Thomas. Good man. Hard-working. He was a machinist at the Ford plant. Made decent money. And we should have been comfortable. But I couldn't relax. Every dollar he earned, I wanted to save. He wanted to buy a nicer car. I said no. He wanted to take a vacation. I said we couldn't afford it. He wanted to go out to dinner once a month. I made us eat hamburger helper until he was ready to scream. We thought about money constantly, not because we didn't have enough, because I couldn't accept that we had enough. No amount would ever be enough, because I wasn't saving for security. I was saving to fill a hole that money couldn't fill. One night, Thomas sat me down at the kitchen table. This was 1958. We'd been married 6 years, and he said something that changed my life. He said, "Margaret, you're so afraid of being broke, that you're making us live like we're broke even though we're not. What's the point of having money if all it does is sit in a bank account while we're miserable?" And I got angry. I told him he didn't understand, that he didn't grow up the way I did, that he didn't know what it felt like to have nothing. And he looked at me with his sad eyes and said, "You're right. I don't know what it's like to have nothing. But you don't know what it's like to have something and enjoy it. And I feel sorry for you." That hurt, because it was true. I realized something that night. Money has to have a purpose beyond just existing. If the only job your money has is to make you feel safe, it's doing a terrible job, because you never feel safe. The number in your bank account goes up, but the anxiety doesn't go down. So I had to ask myself, what is money actually for? And the answer I came to was this: money is for buying time and choices. That's it. That's all it does. It buys you time to spend on things you care about. And it buys you choices so you're not trapped by circumstance if your money isn't buying you either. Time or choices, you're using it wrong. After that conversation, Thomas and I made a deal. We would save 30% of everything we earned. No exceptions. But the other 70% we would use to actually live, to have experiences, to enjoy the time we had. And you know what happened? We saved more money that way, because when you're not white-knuckling every penny, when you're not treating money like a scarce resource you have to hoard, you think more clearly. You make better decisions. You don't panic. The first real lesson I learned about money. You have to know what it's for. And it's not for safety. It's for freedom. Now. I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you angry, because you're going to think I'm being condescending. But I'm not. I'm being truthful. The math of building wealth is incredibly simple. I was a secretary. I didn't go to college. I never understood complicated financial instruments or investment strategies. And I didn't need to, because building wealth comes down to one equation that a child could understand. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Wait. That's it. That's the whole thing. There is no secret. There is no hack. There is no shortcut. It's just that simple equation, repeated over and over again for decades. But here's why people don't do it. Not because they don't understand the math, but because they can't control their behavior. In 1963, Thomas and I bought our first house. $18,500. We put down $3,700, which was 20%. Everyone told us we were crazy to put that much down. They said keep the cash, only put down the minimum, but we didn't want a big mortgage, not because we couldn't afford it, but because I hated owing money. It made my skin crawl. So we paid extra every month, not a lot, an extra $50, $75, sometimes $100. When Thomas got overtime, we paid that house off in 11 years. I was 43 years old, and we owned our house free and clear. And suddenly, we had an extra $167 a month that wasn't going to a mortgage payment. Do you know what we did with it? We pretended it didn't exist. We kept living like we had a mortgage. And that $167 a month went straight into savings. For 20 years. By the time Thomas retired in 1985, we had over $87,000 saved. In 1985, that was real money, and we did it on a machinist's salary and a secretary's wages. We did it because we understood something simple. Small amounts of money, repeated consistently over long periods of time, become enormous amounts of money. Not because of magic, because of arithmetic. People always want to know the secret. They want some trick or loophole, but there isn't one. It's the same boring advice you've heard 1,000 times. Spend less than you make. Save the difference. Don't touch it. Wait. The hard part isn't understanding it. The hard part is doing it when your friends are buying new cars, when your neighbors are going on fancy vacations, when everyone around you is spending money they don't have on things they don't need to impress people they don't like. The hard part is being boring with your money while everyone else is being exciting. But you know what? Boring gets rich. Exciting gets broke. Here's something nobody tells you. Most financial emergencies aren't emergencies. They're just life happening to people who didn't prepare for life to happen. In 1973, Thomas got laid off. The auto industry was in trouble. Gas crisis, recession, plants were closing. He was out of work for 9 months. 9 months. For most people, that would have been catastrophic. We would have lost the house, destroyed our credit, gone into debt. But we didn't, because we were prepared. We had what we called our what-if money. We'd been saving it since we paid off the house. We didn't call it an emergency fund because that sounds panicky. We called it what-if money. What if the car breaks down? What if one of us gets sick? What if Thomas loses his job? By 1973, we had about $12,000 in what-if money. And when Thomas got laid off, we didn't panic. We adjusted. We cut back on spending. We used the savings to cover our basic needs. We didn't go into debt. We didn't liquidate investments. We just waited. And when Thomas got hired back 9 months later, we rebuilt that what-if money. It took us about 2 years to get it back to where it was, but we did it. That experience taught me something crucial. Emergencies can only hurt you financially if you're not prepared for them. And if you're prepared, they're not emergencies. They're just expensive inconveniences. Most people live their entire lives one car repair away from financial disaster, one medical bill, one job loss. And then when disaster comes, they act surprised. They call it bad luck. It's not bad luck. It's poor planning. Bad things happen to everyone. Your car will break down. You will get sick. You might lose your job. These aren't possibilities. They're certainties. The question isn't whether they'll happen. The question is whether you'll be ready when they do. I'm 94 years old. I've lived through the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, multiple recessions, the 2008 financial crisis, and a global pandemic. Every single time, people acted shocked. Every single time, people who had no savings got devastated. And every single time, people who had prepared made it through just fine. The pattern is obvious. But most people refuse to see it because seeing it means admitting they need to change their behavior. And changing behavior is hard. Here's my rule. You'll need enough money to cover 6 months of your basic living expenses. Not 6 months of your current lifestyle. 6 months of your basic needs. Food, housing, utilities, medicine. The things you actually need to survive. And that money doesn't go in investments. It doesn't go in anything risky. It sits in a boring savings account where you can access it immediately if you need it. That's your insurance policy against life, and it's not optional. I need to talk about debt. And I need you to hear this clearly because our culture has normalized something that is profoundly dangerous. Debt is a drug. It gives you an immediate high. You get the thing you want right now. The car, the vacation, the new furniture, the lifestyle. And it feels good. It feels like progress. It feels like success. But then the bill comes, and you realize you didn't buy a thing. You rented your own future income. You sold tomorrow to pay for today. And tomorrow always comes. Thomas and I had one rule about debt. We never borrowed money except for the house. Never. Not for cars. Not for furniture. Not for anything. If we couldn't pay cash, we didn't buy it. If we wanted something, we saved until we could afford it. And you know what? We wanted a lot of things, but we didn't need them. I remember in 1969, our neighbor bought a brand new Cadillac. Beautiful car. He was so proud. Drove it around the neighborhood showing it off. He financed the whole thing. Payments of $127 a month for 4 years. Thomas wanted a new car so badly. Our car was 12 years old and starting to have problems. But we didn't have $4,000 to buy a new car outright, so we didn't buy one. Instead, we took that $127 our neighbor was paying in car payments, and we saved it. Every month, for 3 years. By 1972, we had enough to buy a 3-year-old Buick with cash. It was basically a new car, just slightly used. No payments, no interest, no debt. Meanwhile, our neighbor, he still had a year of payments left on a car that was now 6 years old and not worth half what he owed on it. That's what debt does. It makes you pay more for things that are worth less. It's a terrible deal. But people do it because they can't delay gratification. Here's the truth about debt that nobody wants to admit. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar you could have invested. It's a dollar working for someone else instead of working for you. When you finance a $30,000 car at 6% interest for 5 years, you don't pay $30,000. You pay about $34,800. That extra $4,800, that's your money, but you gave it to a bank dog. And if you invested that $4,800 instead of giving it to the bank at a modest 7% return over 30 years, it would become about $36,500. You traded $36, $500 in future wealth, for the privilege of having a car 3 years earlier. That's the math, and most people never do it. I'm not saying you should never borrow money. Sometimes you need to. A house, an education, maybe starting a business. But it should be rare. It should be for things that increase your ability to earn money or save you more than they cost. Everything else. Save first. Buy second. Because here's what happens when you live debt-free. You stop working for banks and start working for yourself. Your money stays yours. Your choices stay yours. Your future stays yours. And that feeling of owing nobody anything, that's better than any purchase I ever made. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. After 94 years on this planet, I can tell you with absolute certainty your biggest financial asset isn't your money. It's not your house, or your investments, or your job. It's your ability to earn money, your skills, your knowledge, your willingness to work. That's what actually creates wealth. When Thomas died in 2004, I was 74 years old. We'd been married for 52 years. And suddenly, I was alone for the first time in my adult life. I had money. We'd saved well. We had investments. I owned the house free and clear. I was financially comfortable, but I was also terrified because all the financial decisions had been joint decisions. I'd always had Thomas to talk things through with. Now it was just me. And I realized something. I'd let myself become dependent, not on the money, on having someone else to help me think about the money. So at 74 years old, I did something that most people would think was crazy. I got a part-time job, not because I needed the money, because I needed the purpose, because I needed to prove to myself that I could still earn, that I still had value in the marketplace. I worked at a bookstore 3 days a week, made about $8 an hour. Barely anything, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I worked there for 8 years, until I was 82, and every penny I earned, I saved because I didn't need it to live on, but I wanted to prove something to myself. That earning ability doesn't expire at 65, or 70, or even 80. Here's what most people don't understand. The moment you stop believing you can earn money, you become financially fragile. Because you start treating your existing money like it's all you'll ever have. And that makes you afraid to use it, afraid to invest it, afraid to enjoy it. But when you know you can always earn more, you treat money differently. You're willing to take calculated risks. You're willing to spend it on things that matter. Because you're not terrified it'll disappear. Young people ask me all the time, what's the best investment I can make? Stocks, real estate, crypto. And I tell them, invest in yourself first. Learn skills that can't be automated. Become so good at something that people will pay you for it even when the economy is bad. Build relationships with people who can open doors. Take care of your health so you can work as long as you want to. Money comes and goes. Jobs come and go. Investments rise and fall. But your ability to create value, to solve problems, to earn, that's the foundation everything else is built on. I'm sitting here in my house. The same house Thomas and I bought in 1963. I I've been here for 62 years. I know every creak in the floor, every crack in the ceiling, every tree in the yard. I have more money now than I did when Thomas was alive, because I kept saving, because I kept investing, because I lived below my means even when I didn't have to. I could buy a lot of things with this money. I could move to a fancy retirement community. I could travel the world. I could buy a new car every year. I could eat at expensive restaurants every night. But I don't want those things. Because I learned something that took me decades to understand. Money can buy you a lot of things, but it can't buy the things that actually matter. It can't buy back time with people you love who are gone. It can't buy health when your body starts to fail. It can't buy meaning or purpose or the feeling that your life mattered. My friend Betty, she's 89. Her husband made a fortune in real estate. They had everything. Big house, nice cars, vacations, all over the world. And now he's in a nursing home with dementia. He doesn't remember her. He doesn't remember their life together. All that money, and it can't buy back his mind. I'm not saying money doesn't matter. It does. Money gives you options. Money reduces stress. Money lets you help people you care about. Money buys time and freedom, but there's a point of diminishing returns. After you have enough to cover your needs and a reasonable amount of wants, more money doesn't make you happier. It just makes you busier managing the money. Thomas and I figured out how much was enough. We calculated what we needed to live comfortably, what we needed for emergencies, what we wanted to leave to our children. And once we hit that number, we stopped obsessing over growing it. We had enough. And enough is the most powerful word in personal finance. Because once you know what enough is, you can stop. You can stop chasing. You can stop comparing. You can stop sacrificing your present for a future that might never come. I've lived through 94 years. I've seen rich people who were miserable and poor people who were joyful. I've seen people with nothing who were generous and people with everything who were stingy. And the difference was never the money. The difference was knowing what the money was for. And knowing when you had enough of it. So let me give you the plan that took me from a Depression-era child eating dandelions to a 94-year-old woman who never worries about money. It's simple, painfully simple. You're going to be disappointed by how simple it is. First, know what money is for. It's not for safety. It's not for status. It's for buying time and choices. If your money isn't doing that, you're using it wrong. Second, spend less than you earn. I don't care how much you make. If you spend it all, you'll always be broke. If you make $30,000 and spend $25, zero. You're building wealth. If you make $300,000 and spend $305,000, you're going broke slowly. The math doesn't care about your income. It only cares about the gap. Third, save for the inevitable. Bad things will happen. Your car will break. You'll get sick. You might lose your job. Prepare for it. 6 months of basic living expenses in. Savings that you can access immediately. Fourth, avoid debt like it's poison. Because it is. Don't borrow money to buy things that lose value. If you can't pay cash, you can't afford it. Save first. Buy second. Fifth, invest in your ability to earn, your skills, your health, your relationships. That's your real wealth. Money is just a byproduct of being valuable to other people. Sixth, know what enough is. Once you have it, stop chasing more, because more doesn't make you happier. It just makes you busier. That's it. That's the whole plan. No tricks, no secrets, no get-rich-quick schemes. Just boring, consistent, disciplined behavior repeated over decades. Most people won't do it. Not because they can't, but because it's boring. Because it requires delayed gratification. Because it means saying no to things you want in order to have things you need. But the people who do it, they're the ones who sleep at night. They're the ones who don't panic when the economy crashes. They're the ones who have choices when everyone else is desperate. I'm 94 years old. I've lived through economic catastrophes that destroyed people. And I'm fine, not because I was smarter, not because I was luckier, but because I understood what money actually is and how it actually works. And now you do too. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment, and this isn't meant to entertain you. It's meant to change your life. So don't just listen. Do start today, not tomorrow. Today, because tomorrow always comes. And tomorrow, you're either going to be glad you started, or sorry you did in single quotes. Your choice.